It was a Friday night in October, and the kind of cold that doesn't just touch your skin, it reaches inside you and reminds you that you are, in fact, alone. I remember pulling my jacket tighter as I walked down Millbrook Avenue, past the yellow glow of the laundromat, past the Thai place that always smelled like lemongrass and garlic, past the little bookshop that kept its lights on too late for a city that size. I wasn't supposed to go out that night. My best friend Dana had been texting me for 3 days straight. 3 days, message after message, voice notes I kept playing at half volume while pretending to work, memes I didn't laugh at. Finally, a single devastating line that read, and I quote, "If you don't come out tonight, I am personally coming to your apartment with a jar of peanut butter and a sad playlist, and we will sit in your feelings together." She knew me too well. So I went. The bar was called The Lantern, not the most original name in the world, I know, but it had this warmth to it, this amberlit, wood-panelled, jazz in the background kind of warmth that made you feel like maybe the world wasn't so sharp-edged after all. Like maybe, just for a few hours, you could breathe without calculating the cost of it. I was 29 years old. I had just ended a 2-year relationship with a woman named Claire who was brilliant and passionate and completely, utterly wrong for me in every way that mattered. We loved each other the way two people can love each other when the timing is off, and the needs are misaligned, and neither of them wants to be the one to say it first. I said it first. And then I spent 6 weeks feeling like I'd made the biggest mistake of my life, followed by another 6 weeks knowing in my bones that I hadn't. That night at the Lantern, I was somewhere in the middle of processing all of it. Dana had already claimed a booth near the back when I arrived. She was wearing a red top and her hair was down, and she was already on her second drink, which told me she'd been there a while, which told me she'd been more worried about me than she'd let on. She stood up when she saw me, opened her arms, and I walked into that hug the way you walk into a warm house after standing in the snow. "You came," she said into my hair. "You threatened me with peanut butter," I said into her shoulder. She laughed. She had this laugh big and real, and a little too loud for the space, and I loved it completely. We ordered drinks, we talked. She updated me on her situationship with a woman from her pottery class. I told her about the strange, quiet peace of my apartment lately, the way I'd been cooking again, reading again, sleeping through the night again, which was something I hadn't done in over a year. "You seem better," she said, tilting her head, studying me the way friends do when they've been watching you from a worried distance for a long time. "I think I might be," I said, and I meant it. That's the thing about rock bottom, and I know that sounds dramatic for a breakup, but heartbreak has its own kind of gravity, its own pull downward, and when you finally stop falling, when you feel the ground under your feet again, there's this quiet, profound relief that is hard to explain to someone who hasn't felt it. I felt it that night, sitting in that amberlit bar, drinking something with elderflower and gin, listening to Dana tell me about the absolutely unhinged thing her pottery instructor had said. And then she walked in. I noticed her the way you notice a shift in the room's energy before you can identify the cause. One moment I was laughing at something Dana said, and then something in me just turned. She was at the bar, standing with her back half toward me, dark hair just past her shoulders, slightly wavy from what I could tell. She was wearing a moss-green jacket over a white shirt, and she had this posture, this way of standing, that was somehow both relaxed and completely present, like she was entirely comfortable in her own skin and entirely attentive to the world around her. She ordered something, the bartender nodded. She smiled, and even from across the room I could see that the smile reached her eyes. "You've gone somewhere else," Dana said. I blinked, looked back at her. "Sorry, I just..." Dana followed my gaze, looked back at me, raised one very knowing eyebrow. "Go talk to her," she said. I'm not. It's been 6 weeks, Dana." "It's been 12 weeks, she corrected without missing a beat. "And she is stunning, and you are allowed to talk to a beautiful woman at a bar. That's literally what bars are for. They're for drinking. They're for human connection. The drinking is incidental." She took a pointed sip of her drink. "Go." I didn't go. I watched her from across the room for another 20 minutes, watched her laugh with the bartender, watched her check her phone with the expression of someone waiting for a friend who was running late, watched her order a second drink, watched her glance around the room with that easy, curious gaze. And then she looked at me. Not the quick, scanning look you do when you're checking the room. A real look. A moment of actual eye contact that lasted just a beat longer than strangers usually let it. I looked away first, like a complete and total coward. Dana made a sound of exasperation so pure and refined that it could only be produced by someone who has watched their best friend self-sabotage for many years. "I'm going to the bathroom," I said, standing up, "and then I'm going to get us another round. And then you're going to talk to her. Goodbye, Dana." I went to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror for a full 30 seconds, had a brief internal monologue that involved both encouragement and catastrophizing, washed my hands, dried them, walked out. She was at the bar still, closer now, the seat next to her was empty. I ordered drinks. And then, because the bartender was busy and the drinks were taking a moment, and there was nothing else to naturally do, I turned to her slightly and said, "Is it always this crowded on Fridays?" She turned, and up close she was even more striking, dark brown eyes, a small scar near her left eyebrow that I'd notice more later, a mouth that seemed used to smiling. "I actually don't know," she said. "I've never been here before." "First time here too," I said. Which was technically not true. I'd been to the Lantern maybe 6 or 7 times, but it felt like the right thing to say in that moment, and I have made my peace with it. She smiled, extended her hand. "I'm Mara." "I'm Ellie," I said, and I shook her hand like a functional human being, which honestly felt like an achievement. We talked for I don't even know how long. The drinks arrived and I forgot to bring them back to Dana, who I could feel watching me from across the room with barely suppressed delight. Time did that thing it does sometimes, where it becomes unreliable and elastic. Where a few minutes feel like a conversation that has been happening for years. She was a landscape architect. She'd moved to the city 8 months ago from a smaller town in Vermont. She had a younger sister she was clearly very close to, based on the way her face changed when she mentioned her. She'd come to the bar that night because a work friend had bylaid, and she'd decided to come anyway rather than go home to her apartment, which she said felt too quiet lately. I understood that completely. "What about you?" she asked. "I'm a copy editor," I said. "For a publishing house, it's mostly wonderful and occasionally soul-crushing depending on the manuscript." She laughed. "Which was it today?" "Today was actually pretty good. I'm working on a memoir by this retired marine biologist. She's 81 and writes like she's terrified nothing will be left out. It's 700 pages. "That sounds amazing." "It is. She has a chapter about octopuses that made me cry on my lunch break." Her eyes lit up. "Octopuses are extraordinary." "Right, they're basically aliens that decided to live in the ocean." And we were off. We talked about marine biology and architecture, and Vermont winters, and city life, and books we'd loved and books we'd abandoned, and the strange, specific loneliness of living alone in a city full of people. At some point, her friend finally showed up, a loud, warm woman in a yellow scarf, who immediately started apologizing for the subway delay, and the natural moment of our conversation shifted and closed. But before it did, Mara looked at me with that direct, unhurried gaze and said, "Can I give you my number?" I said yes. She asked for my phone, I handed it over. She typed something in, handed it back, smiled. "Text me," she said. "I will," I said. And then her friend was there, and the moment dissolved, and I floated back to Dana's booth with the expression, apparently, of someone who had just briefly touched something electric. "Well," Dana demanded. "She gave me her number," I said. Dana's reaction was something I will not fully describe here because we're in a public forum, and her level of enthusiasm was genuinely startling for a bar environment. But it was warm and wonderful, and exactly what I needed. I looked down at my phone on the walk home. She'd saved herself as Mara the Lantern October, like she wanted to make sure I'd remember the context. I fell asleep that night with my phone on the pillow next to me, which is embarrassing to admit, but it's true, so I'm admitting it. The next morning I opened my contacts, found her name, typed out a message. "Hi, it was really nice talking to you last night. This is Ellie." I read it 4 times, deleted it, rewrote it, read it again, and then I pressed send before my brain could stop me. I waited. 20 minutes passed. 40. An hour. And then my phone buzzed. But the message that came back wasn't from Mara. It was from a number I didn't recognize, a number that was almost the same as the one I'd saved, almost one digit off. The message said, "I think you might have the wrong number, but hi anyway, I hope your Saturday is going well." I stared at my phone for a very long time. I mean a genuinely long time, long enough that my coffee got cold, long enough that the sunlight through my kitchen window moved noticeably. I had typed the number wrong. Or Mara had written it wrong. Or something somewhere had gone slightly sideways in the transfer of 10 digits from one phone to another, and instead of reaching the woman I'd spent 2 hours talking to in an amberlit bar, I had reached a complete stranger. Who had responded, and who had, somewhat remarkably, wished me a nice Saturday. I should have just said, "Sorry, wrong number," and moved on. That was the obvious, rational, normal thing to do. I should have then tried to find the correct number, or gone back to the lantern and asked the bartender, or messaged Dana to see if she'd caught Mara's last name somehow. That is what a sensible person would do. Instead, I wrote back, "Thank you, I hope yours is too. I'm sorry for the confusion. I was trying to reach someone I met last night, and I think I got a digit wrong somewhere." I sent it, and then immediately felt strange about having sent it, because who responds to a wrong number with that much information? Me, apparently. The response came back faster this time. "That's actually a little bit lovely and a little bit sad at the same time. Did you have a good time at least, wherever you met this person?" I blinked. Yes, at a bar, which isn't usually my thing, but it ended up being surprisingly nice. Bars are rarely anyone's thing, I think. We just convince ourselves they are. I laughed out loud, alone in my kitchen on a Saturday morning, at a message from a stranger. That's a very accurate observation. "I have them occasionally," she wrote back. "I'm sorry you didn't reach who you were looking for, I hope you find them." And that should have been it. That should have been the end. A pleasant, brief, slightly odd exchange, and then we both go back to our Saturday mornings. But I sat there looking at those words. "I hope you find them." And something about the gentleness of them, the complete absence of weirdness or annoyance about being accidentally texted by a stranger, made me want to keep talking. "Can I ask you something strange?" I wrote. A pause, a minute, maybe two. "You already accidentally texted me on a Saturday morning. I think we're past the point of asking permission for strange." I smiled. "Fair point, what are you doing today?" Another pause. "Honestly, trying to decide whether to go to the farmer's market or just stay in bed and read. It's that kind of morning." "Which book?" "One I've been avoiding finishing because I don't want it to end. You know that feeling." I absolutely did. "Which one is it?" I asked. She told me, and it was a book I had edited. Not a famous book, not a bestseller, but a quiet, specific, beautiful novel about two women in coastal Ireland in the 1950s. A book that had taken me 3 months to work through, because every time I read it I had to stop and breathe. I told her. "You edited that book," she wrote back. "I did. I cried 3 times during the second pass. I cried 4 times in the last chapter alone." "The lighthouse scene," I wrote. "The lighthouse scene," she wrote back in capital letters, which felt like exactly the right response. And just like that, we were talking. Not the polite, slightly awkward talking of strangers making small talk. Real talking. The kind where one sentence opens into the next, and suddenly an hour has gone by, and you haven't moved from your chair. Her name was Sam. She didn't offer a last name, and I didn't ask. She lived in the city, in a neighborhood about 20 minutes from mine by subway. She worked in education, something to do with curriculum development, she said. Though she was vague in a way that felt less like evasion, and more like the kind of person who doesn't lead with their job title. She asked me questions, real ones, not what do you do, where are you from, the usual inventory of a new acquaintance. She asked what kind of manuscripts I found most difficult to edit and why. She asked if I'd always been a reader or if it had come later. She asked what I thought made a sentence beautiful. Precision, I wrote. A beautiful sentence is precise. It doesn't use 2 words when one will do, but the one word it uses is exactly right. Like a key in a lock, she wrote back. Exactly like that. I want you to understand I was sitting in my kitchen in old sweatpants and mismatched socks, talking to a wrong number on a Saturday morning, and it was one of the most interesting conversations I'd had in months. We talked for 4 hours. Not continuously. There were gaps of 10 or 15 minutes where one of us was making food or switching laundry or just needed a moment to think, but the conversation kept coming back, like a thread that kept being picked up again. At some point in the early afternoon, she wrote, "I should probably actually eat lunch." "Same," I said. "I've had coffee and nothing else." "That's concerning." "I know." A pause. "This has been a very unexpected Saturday," she wrote. "Good unexpected or bad unexpected?" "Good," she said without hesitation. "Genuinely good." I smiled at my phone for an embarrassingly long time. "Same," I wrote. "Are you going to try to find the person from the bar?" she asked. And I had to think about that, genuinely think about it, because the honest answer was yes, probably. Mara had been charming and beautiful, and I'd felt something real in that conversation at the bar. But I'd also just spent 4 hours talking to someone I'd never met, who had appeared in my life because of a single mistyped digit, and who had somehow made a Saturday morning feel like more than a Saturday morning. "I don't know," I admitted. "That's an honest answer," she said. "You asked an honest question." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm glad you texted the wrong number," she wrote, "even if it was by accident." And I sat with that for a long moment, the warmth of it, the quiet, uncomplicated warmth. "Me too," I said. We didn't talk again that day, but I thought about her. I thought about her the way you think about something that you can't quite categorize, something that doesn't fit into the existing folders of your mental life and so just sits there, vivid and unresolved, waiting for you to make sense of it. I made dinner, I called my mom, I watched half a documentary about coral reefs and thought about the octopus chapter in the marine biologist's memoir, and before I went to sleep, I looked at the thread of messages on my phone. A stranger, a complete stranger, who had wished me a nice Saturday and then spent 4 hours talking to me about books and sentences and farmers' markets. I saved her number. Not under wrong number, under Sam. 3 days passed. I found Mara's correct number through an unexpected route. Dana, who had apparently clocked Mara's face and done a little social media detective work with the dedication of someone who takes her best friend duties very seriously. She texted me a screenshot with a caption that said, "You're welcome, also I need a raise for this." I texted Mara. She responded warmly, apologized for the number mix-up, said she'd figured something had gone wrong when she didn't hear from me. We made vague, genuine-sounding plans to get coffee sometime. And then for reasons I still find hard to fully explain, I also texted Sam. Not for any particular reason, no real prompt or occasion, just, "Hey, it's the wrong number person. I found the correct number for the bar person, by the way." A response came back within minutes. "How? My friend did reconnaissance." "I love that. Did you text them?" "I did. We're maybe getting coffee." "That's good," she wrote then. "How's the marine biologist memoir?" And that was it. That was the beginning. Over the next 3 weeks, Sam and I texted almost every day. Sometimes briefly a sentence, a link to something one of us had read, a question with no particular urgency. Sometimes for hours. Long, winding, unpredictable conversations that went from the professional to the personal to the philosophical and back again, without any awkward transitions. She told me about her work. She was developing a reading curriculum for middle schoolers in under-resourced schools, specifically focused on books featuring queer characters, characters of color, characters whose stories weren't the ones typically centered in standard curriculum. She spoke about it with the kind of quiet, sustained passion that tells you something isn't just a job but a vocation. I told her about the manuscripts I was working on. The Marine Biologist, a debut novel from a young writer in her 20s that was rough and ambitious and occasionally brilliant, a collection of essays by a climate scientist that I kept stopping mid-edit to go look out the window and breathe. She asked me once, "Does editing ever make you want to write?" And I had to sit with that for a while, because the honest answer was complicated. "It makes me want to write better," I said. "When I read something truly precise, something where every word is load-bearing, it makes me want to do that. But I also think I might love being the person who helps someone else's words become the best version of themselves. Like there's something very right about that for me. That's beautiful, she said. You're describing a kind of service, but the sacred kind. I read that message 3 times. Yes, I said, exactly that. She had a way of doing that, of namming something precisely, of handing you back your own thought in a form that was somehow clearer and more true than how you'd given it to her. I started to notice things, the way she texted in complete sentences, almost always but without it feeling formal, the way she'd go quiet for a day and then come back with something thoughtful and unhurried, as though she'd been composing it carefully, the way she'd ask follow-up questions to things I'd said days earlier, proving she'd actually been thinking about them. You mentioned last week that editing a bad manuscript is soul-crushing, she texted one afternoon. But what does soul-crushing actually feel like for you? Like physically, what's the sensation? I laughed out loud at that question, and then I answered it. Like reading something in a language I understand perfectly, but that is somehow being used wrong. Like someone playing all the right piano keys, but in an order that makes you want to close the lid. That's very specific. You asked a very specific question. I like specific things, she said. I was starting to understand that. I was starting to collect specific things about her. The way she mentioned her morning runs with a casual frequency that told me they were important to her. The way she talked about her students without identifying details, but with a fierce, individual tenderness that made it clear she knew them as people, not as data points. The way she occasionally used the word, precisely, in a way that made me think of my own use of that word to describe what made a sentence beautiful. 4 weeks in, she asked, have you had coffee with bar person yet? I had actually. Mara and I had met at a place near her office the week before. It had been nice, genuinely nice. She was interesting and kind and still just as striking in daylight as she'd been in the amber glow of the lantern. But something had been slightly off. Not wrong, not bad. Just the energy we'd had in that first accidental conversation at the bar felt different in the deliberate context of a planned coffee date. Like a song you love that sounds different when you expect to hear it versus when you stumble across it. We'd hugged goodbye and said we should do it again, and I'd walked to the subway thinking about the conversation I'd had that morning with a person I'd never seen. I told Sam, it was nice. Just nice. Just nice, which is a fine thing, nice is good. I wasn't expecting anything. What were you expecting? I thought about that. I think I was expecting to feel something specific. That spark, the thing they make movies about, and instead it just felt like 2 people having a pleasant conversation. That's not nothing, she said. No, but it's not everything either. A pause is. No, she agreed, it's not. I want to be careful here, because looking back now I can see things clearly that I could not see in the middle of them. That is always how it works. You live through something and it is complicated and murky, and you're just navigating it with your hands out in front of you, and then later you can look back and see the shape of it. The shape of it now is clear. I was falling for Sam. Not dramatically, not all at once, not in the movie way where you realize it in a single, clarifying moment, but in the slow, accumulating way that is actually far more terrifying, the way where you just gradually realize that the first thing you think about in the morning is whether she's messaged, the way where something happens during your day and your first thought is that you want to tell her about it, the way where her name in your notifications makes something shift slightly in your chest. I didn't acknowledge it, not to myself, not to Dana, not to anyone. Because acknowledging it would have required me to also acknowledge that I had never seen this person, that I didn't know what her face looked like when she laughed, that she was a voice in a screen, a thread of text, a presence that existed entirely in the glowing rectangle I carried in my pocket. And that felt I didn't know what that felt like, strange, vulnerable, real and not real at the same time. I kept texting her, because whatever the shape of what I was feeling, the conversations were real, the connection was real, and I didn't know what to do with that yet except to keep showing up for it, 6 weeks after the wrong number. A Thursday evening, I was at my desk, going through the last third of the marine biologist's memoir. There's a chapter near the end about the death of her research partner, a woman she'd worked alongside for 30 years, and it had pulled me completely out of my editorial brain and into something much more personal. I set the manuscript down, made tea, stood at my window and watched the street below. My phone buzzed. Sam, are you busy? I had a weird day and I kind of want to talk to someone. Not busy, I wrote back immediately. What happened? A longer pause than usual. Nothing dramatic, just one of those days where everything is technically fine and also nothing feels okay. Do you ever have those? Constantly, I said. Tell me about it. And she did. She'd had a meeting with her organization's board that had gone sideways, not catastrophically, but in the grinding, invisible way where you fight for something you believe in and the other side doesn't understand why you care so much, and you end up walking out feeling both exhausted and strangely alone. She was advocating for a book, a middle-grade novel about two girls who fall in love at summer camp. Sweet, age-appropriate, beautifully written. The kind of book that would have meant something to her, she said, when she was 12. Some board members had pushed back, not cruelly, but firmly. I just keep thinking about what it would have meant to me, she wrote, to read that book at that age, to see myself. And there it was, quietly unannounced in a message about a board meeting, the pronoun, the implication, the small, specific truth of it. To see myself. I read it twice. And then, because it was 6 weeks in and we had built something that felt honest, I wrote, I understand that completely. I'm gay too, and I didn't have books like that when I was 12 either. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Yes. A pause, and then. I spent a long time not knowing how to say that about myself, not in middle school, way later. I thought something was wrong with me until I was almost 20. Same, I wrote. I was 22, and even then it took me another 2 years to say it out loud to someone. Who was the first person you told? My sister, I said. She said, I know, I was waiting for you to figure it out, and I laughed for 10 minutes straight. Sam sent a heart emoji, just one, small and quiet. My first person was my roommate in college. She cried, which terrified me. Happy tears, it turned out. She said she was grateful I trusted her. That's beautiful. She's still my best friend. We talked for 2 more hours that night. Not just about that, about all of it. About what it meant to grow up not seeing yourself in stories. About the specific loneliness of figuring out who you are a little later than the cultural script suggests you should. About the strange, particular relief of certain books and films and moments when you finally see something of yourself reflected back. And somewhere in those 2 hours, something shifted. Something that had been hovering at a careful distance moved closer. I didn't name it, not yet, but I felt it. 7 weeks, 8 weeks. The coffee with Mara happened one more time. And it was fine. It was genuinely fine. She was lovely and I wished her well in a deep and sincere way, and I also knew in my body that whatever spark I'd felt in the lantern had been real but also had run its natural course. I told her kindly and honestly that I thought we were probably better as occasional acquaintances than as people dating. She nodded with the generous grace of someone who had probably felt the same thing and was relieved not to be the one saying it. We hugged, we meant it. And I walked to the subway thinking about the question I had been circling for 2 weeks, the one I kept approaching and then backing away from like a thing that was too bright to look at directly. Had I ever asked Sam what she looked like? No. Had she ever asked me? No. Had either of us mentioned meeting in person? No. And why not? I had thought about it, of course I had, but every time I got close to bringing it up, something in me pulled back, because the conversations were so good, because what we had built in this text thread felt so complete and specific and real, because I was afraid that introducing the physical into it would break something. Which was, I knew, somewhat irrational, and somewhat telling. I talked to Dana about it, eventually, on a Sunday over brunch, cutting into a 2 perfect eggs Benedict, and trying to explain something I still hadn't quite figured out how to explain. Let me get this straight, Dana said slowly. You've been talking to this person every day for almost 2 months. Not every day, most days. Every day, she repeated firmly. You've told her about the Claire breakup. In broad strokes. You've talked about your childhood and your sister, and why you became an editor, and the specific reason that one particular sentence in that one particular novel made you cry on the subway. Yes, and you've never seen her face. Not exactly a requirement for. Ellie, Dana put her fork down, used her full name voice. You are in love with a text message. That's reductive. It's accurate. She's a person, not a text message. She's a very specific, real, funny, sharp, genuinely interesting. Who you have never seen. People form real connections without. Are you afraid? A pause. I picked up my orange juice, set it back down. Of what? Of what happens if you meet her, and it's different than what you've built in your head. There it was, the thing I'd been not quite acknowledging for 2 weeks. Yes, I said quietly, a little yes. Dana was quiet for a moment, and then more gently, and are you afraid of what happens if you meet her and it's not different? I looked at her. You mean if it's even better? I mean if it's real in a different way, a fuller way, a way that asks more of you. I sat with that for a long time. Loving someone or beginning to love someone from a safe distance through the mediated language of text messages, where you can compose yourself before you respond, where you have time to choose the right word, where you can take a breath between revelations, that is one kind of real. But it is not the only kind. And I think I had been hiding just a little in the safety of the distance. It was a Tuesday night, almost exactly 9 weeks after the wrong number. I was in bed, reading a manuscript that wasn't holding my attention, when my phone lit up. Sam, can I ask you something? Always, I wrote. A pause, longer than usual. I've been thinking about something for a while, and I've been not asking it because I didn't want to make things weird, but I think not asking it has its own kind of weirdness, so. My heart was doing something complicated. Ask, I said. Do you want to meet? I put the manuscript down. Read the message again. Like in person. That's generally what meet means, yes, unless you have a very advanced texting setup. I laughed, my hands were shaking slightly. I noticed this about my hands and thought it was interesting information. Why now? I asked. Because I've been talking to you almost every day for 2 months, and I don't know what your face looks like, and I find I want to know what your face looks like. Simple, direct, devastating in its simplicity and directness. I want to know yours too, I wrote. Yes, I've been wanting to ask for a while. Why didn't you? I was afraid. Of what? That it would be different, that meeting in person would change what we have. A longer pause. What if it makes it more, she wrote. I read that twice, 3 times, felt something open up somewhere in my chest. That possibility scared me too, I admitted. Me too, she said, but I think I'd rather be scared and trying than safe and wondering. I looked at the ceiling for a moment, the quiet apartment around me, the streetlight making a soft square on the wall, all the ordinary specificity of my life. Coffee, I wrote. Coffee, she agreed. Saturday, there's a place near me called Foundry. Good light, not too loud. Saturday, I said. And then, after a moment, Sam. Yes, I'm glad I typed the wrong number. A pause and then. I'm glad you did too. I changed outfits 4 times. I want to be clear that I am not usually a 4-outfit change person. I am, if anything, a grab the thing at the front of the closet and commit person. The 4 changes were a symptom of something else. Dana, who had been updated by text the previous night and had sent back 17 consecutive exclamation points, called me at 9:30 Saturday morning. How are you feeling? She asked. Like I might actually be sick, I said. Is that a symptom of something? Excitement, she said, mixed with terror, classic combo. Great. Ellie, her voice shifted into the warm, no-nonsense register she reserved for important moments. You are going to be fine. You are going to walk into that coffee shop and she is going to be a person. A real, complete, possibly nervous person who has been talking to you for 2 months and who asked to meet you because she wants more of you in her life. Okay, that's what this is. What if it's weird? It might be slightly weird for the first 5 minutes, and then it won't be, because you've already done the hard part, you already know each other. I thought about that, really thought about it. 2 months of almost daily conversation. I knew about her relationship with her best friend from college. I knew she'd been in one serious relationship, a 4-year one that had ended 2 years ago with the mutual, exhausted recognition that they'd grown into different people. I knew she ran because it was the only thing that quieted the part of her brain that never stopped working. I knew she had a complicated relationship with her father and a simple, sustaining one with her mother. I knew she cried at certain kinds of music and could not explain why. I knew she made very good soup. She knew me too, maybe better than most people did because text has a strange way of making you honest. There's no body language to hide behind, no social cues to deflect with, just words chosen with more care than you usually give them. Dana was right, I already knew her. I just hadn't seen her yet. Foundry Coffee was on a quiet side street in her neighborhood. I found it without too much trouble, stood outside for a moment, breathed. Went in. It was exactly what she'd said it would be. Good light, warm and not too loud, the smell of coffee and something baked, the specific, comforting Sunday morning quality of a place that has been loved by its neighborhood for a long time, even though it was Saturday. I looked around, and then I saw her. She was at a table near the window, sitting with one hand wrapped around a mug, looking at her phone with a slight furrow between her brows that disappeared the moment she looked up. Dark hair shorter than I'd imagined somehow cut to her jaw, warm brown skin, eyes that were in person more expressive than any description I might have conjured. She was wearing a dark blue sweater and there was a small silver ring in her left ear and she looked exactly like herself, like a person who had always looked exactly this way. She saw me. She stood up, and I walked across the coffee shop to meet the person I had been accidentally talking to for 9 weeks, and the moment I reached her, she said, "Hi, you have kind eyes, I should have guessed." And I immediately, forgot every single thing I had been afraid of. "Hi," I said, "you look like your voice sounds." She laughed. "What does that mean?" "I don't know, it's a compliment." "I'll take it." We sat down, a server came, I ordered coffee, she ordered a refill, and then we were just there, 2 people at a table by a window on a Saturday morning in November. "Is this weird?" she asked after a moment. "A little," I said, "in a good way." "Yeah," she agreed, "good weird." The first 5 minutes were slightly stilted, exactly as Dana had predicted. The strange work of calibrating a voice to a face to a presence to the person you've been building in your imagination. The minor disorientation of real-world physics after the weightless space of text. And then we started talking. And it was exactly the same rhythm, the same ease, the same way of one sentence opening into the next and the next, except now I could see her face when she laughed. I could watch her hands move when she was making a point. I could notice the way she tilted her head slightly when she was thinking about something. We stayed for 3 hours. When the coffee shop started filling up with the weekend lunch crowd and we could tell our table was needed, we paid the bill and walked out into the grey November air, stood on the sidewalk, neither of us quite ready to end it. "Do you want to walk?" she asked. "Yes," I said. So we walked, down her neighborhood streets, past a little park with benches and bare-armed trees, past a bookshop that was just opening up for the morning, past a wall that someone had painted with an enormous mural of birds in flight. We stopped at the mural. "I love this," she said. "When did you find it?" "My first week here. I got lost on a run and came around that corner and just stopped." I looked at it. The birds were every color, dense at the center, and spreading outward at the edges like an exhale. "It looks like a feeling," I said. She looked at me, not quickly, with the same unhurried attention I'd sensed in her messages. "Which one?" she asked. I thought about it. "The one where something you've been holding loosens," I said, "where you realize you've been bracing for something for a long time and you can finally stop." She was quiet for a moment, looking at the birds. "Yeah," she said softly, "that's the one. We saw each other again the following Thursday. And the Thursday after that. And then a Saturday and a Sunday, and then somewhere in the middle of December it stopped being occasional and became simply regular. The natural rhythm of 2 people who want to be in each other's orbit." We went to a bookshop together, spent 2 hours in there, drifting apart and finding each other again in different sections. She found me crouched in the poetry section, reading the same poem 3 times. Favorite poem? She asked, looking over my shoulder. This one, I said, turning to show her, but it's different every time I read it. That's the mark of a good poem. Or a sign that I keep changing. She looked at me with that expression. She had the one I'd been cataloguing, where she seemed to be looking at something more than the surface of things. Both can be true, she said. We had dinner at a small Italian place near my apartment, split a bottle of wine, talked for so long that the restaurant got quiet around us and we were the last table. On the walk back to my building it started to snow, just lightly, the first real snow of the season. We both stopped at the same moment, looked up. There's something about the first snow, the way it makes the ordinary geography of a city look momentarily transformed, like the world has been given a soft edit. I love this, she said quietly. Me too. We stood there for a moment, side by side, watching the snow drift through the amber halos of the streetlights. And then she turned to look at me, and I turned to look at her. And there was a moment, the kind of moment that has its own gravity, its own pull, where the distance between two people becomes both very small and very significant at the same time. I really like you, she said, simply, no dramatic preamble, just that. My heart did something it had not done in a very long time. I really like you too, I said. She smiled, not a big performative smile, a real one, the small, warm kind. She reached out, took my hand, and we stood there in the first snow of winter, hand in hand, on a street I would walk down many times after that and always think of differently. I want to stop here and say something important. Because this is a love story, and love stories often have the same shape in the telling. The meeting, the obstacles, the resolution, the kiss, and then some version of "and they lived happily ever after," that implies the story ends when the feelings are confirmed. But that's not how love actually works. Love is not a destination you arrive at, it's a practice, a daily practice, the kind that requires attention and honesty and the willingness to be known in full, not just in your best moments. What Sam and I built in the months that followed that snowy December night was that kind of love, the kind that is not only the fireworks but also the Tuesday evenings, the kind that is not only the grand gestures but also the ordinary presence. Let me tell you about the ordinary presence. She came to my apartment on a rainy January Saturday while I was deep in a difficult manuscript. She brought soup. She sat at my kitchen table with papers from work spread around her, and we were both in our own professional worlds, parallel and companionable, for 4 hours. At one point she looked up and said, "Does this sentence work?" and read something aloud from a curriculum document. I said, "The second clause is doing too much work. Split it." She nodded, made the change, went back to her papers. That was one of the best days we'd had together by that point. I want you to understand how significant that felt. Two people who can work side by side, who can be quiet together, who trust each other enough to ask, "Does this sentence work?" without any fear of judgment. There are people you are exciting with, people who bring out your most dazzling self, and there are people you can be ordinary with, people in whose presence your most ordinary self is welcome. Sam was both, and I had learned from Clea that the second kind mattered more than I had previously understood. In February she told me about her last relationship. Not all at once, in pieces over several conversations, a woman she had loved deeply and who had loved her, but whose vision of her life had not made room for the kind of work Sam needed to do, who had wanted Sam to be less driven, less consumed, less of the specific things Sam most needed to be. I kept trying to be smaller, she said. We were in her apartment on her couch, the city lights visible through the large window she loved. Not smaller as a person, smaller in my ambitions, like I was apologizing for caring so much. Did it work? I asked. For a while, and then one day I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt like myself. I looked at her. What did you do? I ended it, she said. It took me 3 months of knowing it was the right thing before I could do it, but I did it. What did she say? That she thought I was making a mistake, that I was choosing work over love. A pause, but that wasn't right, I was choosing myself, which isn't the same thing. I reached over, took her hand, she let me. I never want you to be smaller, I said, for me or for anyone. She looked at me, her eyes were a little bright. I know, she said, that's one of the things I love about being with you. The word love sat between us, quiet and warm, Not directed at me yet, not yet, but close, reaching toward it. It was a Tuesday in March. She'd had a hard week. The curriculum project had hit a wall, a funding issue, complex organizational politics. The kind of setback that doesn't break things but slows them enough to be demoralizing. She'd been quieter than usual, present but carrying something. I made dinner at my place. Nothing fancy, pasta, a salad, a bottle of wine that I'd been saving for a good occasion, and then decided that showing up for someone you care about is always a good occasion. We ate, we talked. She was tired in a way that was more than physical. After dinner, she helped me with the dishes. We did them side by side, passing things back and forth in the easy, unthinking choreography of people who have been in a kitchen together many times. The radio was on low, something with strings. At some point she stopped, stood there with a wet dish in her hand and a faraway look on her face. "Hey," I said softly. She came back, looked at me. "Sorry, I was somewhere else." "It's okay, where were you?" "Just thinking about," she trailed off, put the dish down, leaned back against the counter. "Do you ever feel like you've been working towards something your whole life and you can't quite see its shape yet? Like you know it's there, you can almost see the outline, but the details are still unclear," I said. "Yes." I dried my hands, turned to face her fully. "I think the details get clearer as you get closer," I said. "I think that's how it's supposed to work. You don't see the whole shape from the beginning. You just keep walking toward the thing you can feel." She looked at me for a long moment. "When did you get wise?" she said, and her voice was slightly unsteady. "I had a good teacher," I said, accidentally via text. She laughed, the kind of laugh that is the other side of almost crying, the release kind. And then she stepped forward and put her arms around me, and I held her, in my kitchen in the quiet with the dishes done and the radio on low. And I said into her hair, without planning it, without considering the timing or the risk, just because it was true and I was done not saying it. "I love you." She went very still. I felt my heart turn over, the adrenaline of having said it, the sudden acute awareness that I had said it and could not unsay it. And then she pulled back just enough to look at me. Her eyes were bright, not with sadness. "I love you too," she said. "I've been wanting to say it for weeks." "Me too," I said. "Why didn't you?" "Same reason I almost didn't text you to meet, afraid of what it meant." "What does it mean?" I thought about it. "That this is real," I said, "like fully actually real, and that's the best thing and also the most terrifying thing." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's exactly what it means." She took my face in her hands, and she kissed me. Not for the first time, but for the first time after love had been said out loud, which is its own kind of first time. I want to tell you some things that Sam taught me, not because she set out to teach them, she didn't. She's not that kind of person, but because she lived in a way that showed me things I needed to see. She taught me that care can be quiet, that love doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures and declarations. Sometimes it is a text that says, "How's the memoir going?" Sometimes it is showing up with soup on a rainy day without being asked. Sometimes it is just sitting in the same room, breathing the same air, being present and unhurried. She taught me that honesty, real honesty, the kind that is specific and clear and slightly uncomfortable, is a form of love. She never told me only what I wanted to hear. When I sent her something I'd written and asked for her thoughts, she gave them. When I was avoiding something I needed to face, she named it, gently but without looking away. She taught me that your career and your values and your most consuming work do not have to be the enemy of intimacy, that you can love someone fiercely and also love what you do, that the person who is right for you will not need you to choose. She taught me that two people can know each other through words before they know each other through presence, and that this is not a lesser kind of knowing. It is, perhaps, a more honest one. And she taught me, by existing and being herself, that the universe occasionally sends things our way by mistake, and that the mistake is sometimes the very point. Now when someone asks us how we met, there are several versions we have deployed over the years. The short version, we met through a mutual connection. The medium version, it's complicated, there was a bar involved and a wrong number. The long version, the true version, the one we tell when we have time and wine and people who actually want to hear it. I went to a bar on a cold October night because my best friend threatened me with a sad playlist and a jar of peanut butter. I met a beautiful woman and got her number and then mistyped it the next morning and reached someone else entirely. That someone else wished me a nice Saturday. I wrote back. We talked for 4 hours. And then we kept talking. For 9 weeks, through text messages and near misses, and the slow, accumulating weight of two people getting to know each other in the most honest medium available. And then we met in a coffee shop with good light, and walked through a neighborhood, and saw a mural that looked like a feeling, and stood in the first snow of winter. And I fell in love with someone I might never have found if a single digit had been correct. That's the story. And every time I tell it, Sam listens to the part about the wrong number with the expression she reserves for things she finds deeply, specifically satisfying, like a key in a lock. There's a conversation Sam and I have sometimes late at night, when the apartment is quiet and the city has gone to its lower hum, and we are both awake in the comfortable, unhurried way that good nights together allow. It starts differently each time, but it usually ends up in the same place. What if you'd found the right number, she asked once. Then I'd have texted Mara and probably gone on a few more dates with her, and decided it wasn't right, and that would have been that. And you never would have texted me. And I never would have texted you. A silence, the weight of it, the strange, vertiginous awareness of how close things came to not being. I don't like thinking about that, she said. Me neither. But it also, she was quiet for a moment, working it out. It also makes me feel like okay, if something this random could happen, something this apparently impossible, then maybe the world is more porous than we think, more full of gaps where good things can slip through. I thought about that. More forgiving, I said. Yes, exactly, more forgiving. We lay there in the quiet. Sam, I'm glad you answered. She turned her head to look at me in the dark. You were a stranger who texted me on a Saturday morning, she said. Of course I answered. I always answer the interesting ones. How did you know I was interesting? She smiled. Your first response. When I said you had the wrong number, you apologized and then immediately told me why. Context, explanation, genuine warmth. That's not how most people respond to an awkward situation. Most people just say sorry and disappear. And I didn't. And you didn't, you stayed. She paused. I always stay for people who stay. I want to take a moment to list the things that almost didn't happen. Dana almost didn't invite me out that night. I almost didn't go. I almost didn't talk to Mara at the bar. Mara almost wrote a different digit. I almost dismissed the wrong number response and moved on. I almost didn't write back that first morning. I almost never asked Sam to meet in person. She almost didn't ask me first. The list goes on. How many pivots? How many almost nots? How many moments where a single different choice would have redirected everything? Where I would have walked a different path through a city full of different paths and never arrived at this particular, specific, irreplaceable life. It is both humbling and exhilarating to think about, the fragility of it, the number of things that had to go slightly sideways in exactly the right sequence to land me here. And I think the lesson in that is not that the universe has a plan. I don't know if it does. I don't know if there's a guiding hand arranging the digits and the decisions and the October nights. But I do think there's something in the responding, in the staying, in the not dismissing the small, accidental, apparently insignificant moment. I responded to a wrong number. I stayed in the conversation when it would have been easy to drift away. I didn't dismiss the growing thing between us as just a text friendship, too strange to be real. I let it be real. And that, I think, is what I had some control over, not the mistake that sent the message to the wrong phone, but what I did with the mistake once it arrived. I want to tell you this because you might be wondering. Mara and I stayed in occasional, friendly contact. She's the kind of person who you can have a warm, loose friendship with even when romance doesn't materialize. The kind who texts a meme every couple of months or sends a thinking of you when something in the news reminds her of a conversation you had. About a year after our ill-fated coffee date, she texted me to say she'd met someone, a sculptor. She sent a picture. They looked in that photograph like two people who had found exactly the right fit for each other. I showed the picture to Sam. She looks happy, Sam said. She does. Are you glad that it didn't work out? I looked at Sam, at her face, which I now knew as well as I knew my own, the small scar near her left eyebrow, which she'd gotten falling off her bicycle at age 9, the way her eyes crinkled in the corners when something truly delighted her, the particular quality of her attention when she was listening, which was one of the most valuable things I had ever been given access to. There is not a single cell in my body, I said, that wishes anything had gone differently. She smiled, the small, warm, real one. Good, she said, me neither. 2 years after the night at the Lantern, we are sitting in the apartment that is now ours. We moved in together in August of last year. It was not a dramatic decision. It was the natural conclusion of 2 people who had been, for all practical purposes, sharing their lives for a year and a half. We found a place with a room that is technically a second bedroom, but has become a shared office, her desk at one wall, mine at another, the window between us looking out over a courtyard with an old oak tree. We work in that room most evenings, side by side in our own parallel worlds, the way we were in my kitchen that first Saturday. She's building a new curriculum now, expanding it with funding she fought hard to secure. I'm working on a novel, not editing someone else's but writing my own, tentatively, quietly, with more fear and more excitement than anything I've done in years. She reads pages when I show them to her. She's honest in the way she was always honest. She says things like, "This paragraph is doing too much work. What are you actually trying to say here?" Which is almost exactly what I said to her once about a sentence in a curriculum document, and we both recognize the echo and it makes us laugh. We have a bookshelf that is a collaboration. Her books and my books, not organized by owner but by category, because that's how we actually use them. We have a kitchen that we've learned together, her good at the patient things, soups and stews, things that require time. Me better at the quick things, salads and pastas, things that require timing. We go to the Lantern sometimes. I have never told the bartender the story, but I always think about it when we walk in. The amber light, the night in October, the way a room can hold the ghost of something that had not yet happened. We have walked past the mural of birds in flight many times. It looks to me exactly as it did that first time, like an exhale, like something loosening. I am telling you this story and I want to be clear about why. Not because I think you should go out and misdial numbers in hopes of falling in love. Not because I think love is something that happens to you accidentally, without intention or work. But because I think there is something here about openness, about responding. There is a certain kind of person who, when the universe sends them a small, unexpected, slightly inconvenient surprise, closes the door on it quickly and tidily, and moves on with the plan. And there is a certain kind of person who opens the door, who says, "This is strange, and strange things are worth following at least a little way down the road." I have always been both at different times. Circumstances determine which one I am on any given day. But on that Saturday morning, with cold coffee and the wrong number on my screen and a message that said, "I hope your Saturday is going well," I was, for some reason I can't fully account for, the second kind. I opened the door, and on the other side of it was the most honest, most sustaining, most unexpectedly complete thing that has ever been in my life. So whatever the wrong number equivalent is in your life, I hope you respond to it. The thing that comes in the wrong form, from the wrong direction, at a moment you weren't prepared for. The person who shows up in a category you weren't looking in. The conversation you almost don't have. The message you almost don't send. The door you almost don't open. Almost is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Almost is the fulcrum of the whole story. I hope you get to the other side of your almost. There is one more thing I want to tell you. I asked Sam once to tell me what she had thought that first Saturday morning, when the text came in from an unknown number. What had gone through her head. She thought about it for a moment, the way she does when she's composing an honest answer. "I almost didn't respond," she said. "Really?" My first instinct was to just send a quick wrong number and move on. I had things to do. I was in the middle of a chapter. "What changed your mind?" She smiled, "The way you apologized." "What do you mean?" Most people, when they realize they've texted the wrong number, send one word. "Sorry," or nothing at all. They just delete the thread and forget it. But you sent this whole sentence. You explained yourself. You told me you'd been trying to reach someone from a bar. You were just guileless about it. Like you assumed I was the kind of person who would appreciate context and not judge you for the mistake. I stared at her. I didn't think about that at all when I wrote it. I know, that's what I mean by guileless, and that's why I responded, because I thought this is someone who just naturally assumes good faith in other people, who extends courtesy to strangers without calculating whether it's worth it. A pause. I thought, I want to know this person a little more. I sat with that for a while. How we present ourselves in the small, unconsidered moments. How we treat strangers in the spaces where no one is watching and there's nothing to gain. How much of our real character lives there, in those unrehearsed, unperformed, completely ordinary moments. I had not been trying to impress her. I had just been myself, someone who defaults to warmth with strangers, who explains rather than withdraws, who assumes good faith without doing the math first. And she had seen that, in 2 sentences, before she knew anything else about me. I've been known by a lot of people in my life, she said quietly, and I've known a lot of people, but I think you saw me faster than almost anyone, and I saw you too. In a wrong number text, I said. In a wrong number text, she confirmed. The medium matters less than you think. There's a small thing I do sometimes. When the world is good and quiet, and I want to feel the texture of gratitude for a specific, particular thing, I open my contacts. I scroll to Sam's name, and I look at the number. The correct number now, the one I typed in myself, the one I know by heart. But I remember the other one. The one I typed by accident on a Saturday morning in October when I was lonely and healing and hadn't planned on any of it. 10 digits, 9 of them right, 1 of them wrong. And the one that was wrong changed everything. I put my phone back in my pocket, and I go find her. She's usually in the office at her desk by the window or in the kitchen making soup, or on the couch with a book and her feet tucked under her, and that focused, private expression she gets when she's deep in something. I go find her, and she looks up, and I think every single time how extraordinary it is, how fragile and miraculous, how close it came to not being. And how glad I am that I typed the wrong number, and she picked up and I stayed.